There are moments in life when the world turns its back on you, and you're left wondering if anyone would notice if you simply disappeared. Anna Briggs knew that feeling all too well. In the winter of 1878, the town of Pine Hollow cast her out into a blizzard with nothing but the clothes on her back. Her husband was dead, his debts unpaid, and nobody wanted the burden of a penniless widow. Most thought she'd freeze before morning. But 8 miles up the mountain, a man who'd lived alone for years found her collapsed in the snow. Thomas Hale had sworn off helping people long ago, but something made him carry this stranger to his cabin. What happened over that long winter would change them both. Before we continue, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 3 days before Anna Briggs found herself dying in the snow, she stood in the cramped back room of Henderson's General Store, her fingers working a needle through a torn flour sack. The November afternoon light came thin and grey through the single window. Barely enough to see by, but she'd learned to sew in worse conditions. Her wedding ring caught what little brightness there was. A simple gold band that had once meant everything and now felt like a shackle binding her to a dead man's debts. That's fine work. "Mrs. Briggs," old Henderson said from the doorway, his voice carrying that particular tone of pity that had become familiar over the past 6 months. "But I'm afraid I can't pay you for it." Anna's needle paused mid-stitch. She didn't look up. "I understood we had an arrangement, Mr. Henderson." "We did." "We do." He cleared his throat, and she heard him shift his weight from foot to foot. "It's just that Cooperman came by this morning. Said any shopkeeper who extends you credit or employment will find their own loans called in. I've got a wife and 3 children, Mrs. Briggs. I can't risk it." The needle moved again, steady and sure, though Anna's heart hammered against her ribs. "I see. I'm sorry. I truly am. If there was any way... Thank you for being honest with me, Mr. Henderson." She tied off the thread, bit it clean, and folded the mended sack with careful precision. "I'll be going now." She walked out through the store's front room, past shelves stocked with goods she could no longer afford to buy, past the warmth of the pot-bellied stove, into the cold afternoon air of Pine Hollow's main street. The town had never been much. 24 buildings clustered at the base of the mountain range, most of them log construction, all of them weathered by altitude and harsh winters. But it had been home for 5 years, ever since Samuel brought her here with promises of opportunity and a fresh start. Those promises lay buried with him now, 6 feet under the frozen ground of the cemetery on the hill. Anna pulled her threadbare shawl tighter around her shoulders. The wool had been thick once, woven by her mother's hands back in Ohio before the consumption took her. Now it was worn thin in places, more holes than fabric, but it was all she had left of her family. That and the memories, which sometimes felt like more burden than comfort. The street was quiet, most folks keeping indoors as the temperature dropped. Smoke rose from chimneys in straight grey columns, then bent sideways when it hit the wind coming down from the peaks. Anna had learned to read those smoke patterns. When they bent like that, it meant a storm was coming, usually within a day or 2. She needed to find work before the snow came. After that, travel would be impossible until spring thaw. And her landlord had already given her until the end of the week to pay the 2 months' back rent she owed. Martha Whitfield's dress shop stood on the corner, its painted sign swaying in the wind. Martha was the closest thing to a friend Anna had left in Pine Hollow, though even that friendship had grown strained under the weight of public opinion and Silas Cooperman's influence. Still, Martha had a kind heart and a practical head for business. Perhaps she needed help with the winter sewing. The shop bell chimed as Anna pushed through the door. Warmth enveloped her immediately. Martha kept a good fire going, and the familiar smell of fabric and lamp oil brought a moment of comfort. The shop was empty of customers, just Martha herself at the work table, pinning a dress pattern to dark blue wool. "Anna." Martha looked up, and her face showed the conflict Anna had seen so often lately. Sympathy warring with fear, kindness held back by self-preservation. "I wasn't expecting you. I was hoping you might have some work. Mending, alterations, anything you need." Anna kept her voice steady, her pride intact even as she asked for help. "I'm a fast worker, and I'll take whatever rate you think fair." Martha set down her pins carefully, each movement deliberate, buying herself time. "You know I would if I could. Your stitching is better than mine, truth be told." "But Cooperman—" "Yes, he spoke to Henderson too. He's been to every business owner in town." Martha's voice dropped low, though they were alone. "He wants you gone, Anna. He's made that clear. Anyone who helps you stay will find themselves in the same position Samuel was in before he died." The mention of Samuel's name brought the familiar ache, though it had changed over the months. The sharp grief had dulled to something heavier, complicated by anger and confusion about the debts he'd left behind. $3,000 owed to Cooperman's bank with nothing to show for it. Samuel had never been a gambling man, never been reckless with money. Yet somehow in the last year of his life he'd borrowed and lost a fortune. "What am I supposed to do, Martha?" The question came out quieter than Anna intended. "Where am I supposed to go?" "I don't know." Martha came around the table, took Anna's hands in her own. Her fingers were warm, calloused from years of needlework, strong and capable. "If I had family nearby, I'd send you to them. If I had money of my own, I'd lend it. But William controls our finances, and he says we can't risk Cooperman's anger." "I understand. Do you have anyone? Any family back east who might take you in?" Anna shook her head. "My parents are gone. Samuel was an only child, and his parents died before we married." "There's no one." Martha squeezed her hands, and Anna saw tears forming in the older woman's eyes. "I'm so sorry. This isn't right. What they're doing to you, it isn't Christian and it isn't just, but it's happening anyway." Anna pulled her hands free gently, stepped back toward the door. "Thank you for your honesty, Martha. You've been kinder than most." Outside again, the wind had picked up, carrying the sharp scent of coming snow. Anna walked without direction at first, just moving to keep warm, her mind working through options that kept narrowing to nothing. She had perhaps $3 to her name, hidden in the lining of her skirt. Enough for a week's food if she was careful, but not enough for train fare to anywhere that might offer a fresh start. Not enough for a horse, barely enough to matter. The bank stood at the end of the street, 2 stories of painted white clapboard that looked out of place among the rough log buildings. Silas Cooperman had built it 5 years ago, when silver strikes in the nearby mountains brought a rush of prospectors and the money that followed them. The strikes had mostly played out now, but Cooperman had diversified, buying up property, extending loans, positioning himself as the most powerful man in Pine Hollow. Anna found herself walking toward it, though she had no clear plan. Perhaps she could reason with him, work out some kind of arrangement. Perhaps if she spoke to him directly, explained her situation, he might show mercy. The thought was desperate and she knew it, but desperation had become her constant companion. The bank's interior was warm, heated by a large iron stove in the corner. A young clerk sat at a desk near the front, and he looked up as Anna entered, his expression shifting immediately from professional courtesy to poorly concealed disdain. "Mrs. Briggs, Mr. Cooperman isn't seeing anyone today. Wait, he specifically said he's not seeing you." Anna moved past the clerk toward the door marked private at the back of the room. The clerk stood quickly, his chair scraping loud against the wood floor. But before he could intercede, the door opened and Cooperman himself emerged. He was a tall man, well-fed in a town where most folks carried lean frames from hard work and lean times. His suit was expensive, tailored, his beard trimmed close in the fashion of Eastern businessmen. He looked at Anna with eyes that held no warmth, no sympathy, nothing but cold calculation. "Mrs. Briggs, I thought I'd made our situation clear. You've made it impossible." "Mr. Cooperman, that much is clear." Anna stood straight, met his gaze. "I'm asking you to reconsider. Give me time to find work, to pay what Samuel owed. I'm willing to work off the debt however long it takes. Your husband owed $3,000. At your earning potential, you'd be working it off for the next 20 years. Cooperman pulled a watch from his vest pocket, checked it, then returned it. The gesture was dismissive, designed to show her how little her time was worth to him. I have no interest in such an arrangement. Then what do you want from me? I want you gone from Pine Hollow. Your husband made poor choices, Mrs. Briggs, and those choices have consequences. You represent those consequences, and your continued presence here is a reminder I don't care to have. Anna's hands clenched inside her shawl. Samuel wasn't a gambler. He wasn't foolish with money. I don't understand how these debts accumulated. Something flickered in Cooperman's expression, too quick to read. How your husband spent his borrowed money is between him and his conscience. The debt, however, is a matter of public record. You have until Sunday to vacate your residence. After that, I'll have the marshal remove you. It's Wednesday. That's 4 days. There's a storm coming, Mr. Cooperman. You can see it in the sky. Then I suggest you hurry. He turned back toward his office, then paused. A word of advice, Mrs. Briggs. Don't bother seeking employment here. I've made it clear to every business owner that helping you remain in Pine Hollow will result in consequences they can't afford. You have no future here. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be for everyone. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded like a cell door locking. Anna stood in the bank for a long moment, the clerk watching her with uncomfortable attention, before she turned and walked out into the afternoon that had grown noticeably colder. The sun hung low behind clouds that looked heavy with snow, and the wind had taken on that peculiar bite that promised a hard freeze by nightfall. She had 4 days, no prospects, and nowhere to go. Friday morning came with a sky the color of old pewter and wind that cut through fabric like it wasn't there at all. Anna stood on the porch of the boarding house with everything she owned tied in a bundle made from a spare blanket. Mrs. Grayson had barely spoken to her, just watched with tight-lipped disapproval as Anna carried her belongings down the stairs. The street was empty this early, most people keeping to their warm houses with the storm so close. Anna could taste snow in the air, that particular metallic sharpness that came before a heavy fall. The mountains to the west had disappeared entirely behind low clouds, and the wind carried the smell of pine and ice. She started walking, not toward the train depot, she couldn't afford passage, but toward the eastern road that led through the mountain pass toward the next town, some 40 miles distant. Perhaps she could find work there, somewhere Cooperman's influence didn't reach. It was a desperate plan, but it was all she had. She'd made it perhaps a quarter mile when she heard the horse behind her. Turning, she saw Silas Cooperman riding up with 2 men she recognized from town, the Reynolds brothers, who did odd jobs and enforcement work for anyone willing to pay. They weren't pleasant men on their best days. Mrs. Briggs, Cooperman reined his horse to a stop a few yards away. I thought I made it clear you were to be gone by this morning. I'm going. As you can see, the eastern road? Cooperman glanced at the sky, then back at her. That's a fool's errand in this weather. The pass will be snowed in before you're halfway through. That's my concern, Mr. Cooperman, not yours. He dismounted, handed his reins to one of the Reynolds brothers, and walked closer. Anna held her ground, though everything in her wanted to step back from the cold calculation in his eyes. I'm going to be direct with you, Mrs. Briggs, because I think you're smart enough to understand. Pine Hollow is my town. I've invested too much time and money here to have complications. Your husband became a complication. You're a complication. Complications need to be resolved. Samuel wasn't a complication. He was a person, a good man. Your husband found something he shouldn't have found. He asked questions he shouldn't have asked. And yes, before you ask, I dealt with that situation permanently. Cooperman's voice held no remorse, no shame. The debts were fabricated, Mrs. Briggs. Every dollar, every document. Your property, that small piece of land Samuel bought when you first arrived, sits directly over a silver vein that assayers say could be worth $500,000. Samuel discovered it last spring. Foolishly, he came to me for a loan to begin proper mining operations. Even more foolishly, he showed me the assay report. Anna's breath caught. The bundle slipped from her fingers into the snow. I offered to buy the land. He refused. So I created debt, made it look like he'd squandered money he'd borrowed. When he continued to refuse to sell, despite the pressure of mounting loans, I arranged for his accident. Cooperman pulled on his gloves, the gesture casual, as if they were discussing weather rather than murder. The roof he fell from had boards I'd paid to saw halfway through. It was quick, at least. I'm not needlessly cruel. You killed him. The words came out flat, emotionless, though Anna felt like the ground had dropped away beneath her feet. You murdered my husband for silver. I eliminated an obstacle, and now I'm eliminating the other. You're going to walk east, Mrs. Briggs, into that storm. The Reynolds brothers are going to make sure you keep walking, far enough that when the snow comes, you won't be able to turn back. With any luck, you'll die of exposure before nightfall. If you somehow survive and manage to return, I'll simply arrest you for theft. I have documents prepared claiming you stole from the bank, and you'll hang. Either way, by spring the land will be legally mined through debt foreclosure, and I'll begin mining operations. Anna's mind raced, trying to process what she was hearing. Samuel hadn't gambled. He'd discovered silver. He'd been murdered. And now Cooperman was calmly explaining that he intended to kill her too. Why tell me this? Why not just let me leave and say nothing? Because I want you to know, in whatever final hours you have, that your husband died for a reason, that his death meant something. Call it professional respect. He was resourceful, I'll give him that. And because dead women don't repeat conversations, Mrs. Briggs, the storm will take you, and Pine Hollow will forget you ever existed. He turned back to his horse, mounted smoothly. Gentlemen, escort Mrs. Briggs well beyond the point of return. Make sure she understands that coming back would be even more fatal than going forward. The Reynolds brothers dismounted. The older one, Carl, grabbed Anna's arm. Let's go, ma'am. No sense making this harder than it needs to be. They walked her east, Carl on one side and his brother Ned on the other, their hands firm but not brutal on her arms. Anna stumbled once on the frozen ground, and they hauled her upright without comment. The wind grew stronger as they left the shelter of the town, and the first snowflakes began to fall, small and hard, like grains of rice against her face. The road climbed gradually into foothills, covered in pine and aspen, the bare branches of the latter rattling in the wind. Anna's mind churned as she walked. Samuel had found silver. Cooperman had killed him. Now she was being sent to die in a blizzard, and no one in Pine Hollow would question her disappearance. How much is he paying you? She asked the Reynolds brothers. Enough, Carl said. To murder someone? To walk someone out of town. What the weather does after that ain't our concern. They walked for what felt like hours, but was probably less than one. The snow fell heavier now, reducing visibility to a few dozen yards. The temperature had dropped significantly, and Anna's thin dress and threadbare shawl provided almost no protection. Her feet, in worn boots that let in water and cold, had gone numb. Finally, Carl stopped. They were perhaps 5 miles from town, maybe 6, at a place where the road bent around a granite outcropping. Beyond this point, the route became more treacherous, winding up into the high pass. This is far enough, Carl said. You keep walking, Mrs. Briggs. Don't try to come back. If we see you in Pine Hollow again, Cooperman's orders are to shoot you on sight and claim you were trespassing. You're killing me just as surely as if you pulled a trigger. Like I said, the weather does what it does. But Carl looked uncomfortable, and his brother wouldn't meet her eyes. For what it's worth, I'm sorry, but a man's got to make a living. They left her there, turned back toward town. Anna watched them disappear into the snow, then turned to face the road ahead. She could go forward, into the storm and the mountain pass, with no supplies and inadequate clothing. Or she could go back to Pine Hollow and be shot or arrested. Neither option offered survival. She started walking forward because it was the only direction that didn't guarantee immediate death. The snow fell heavier with each step, already accumulating on the road and making footing treacherous. The wind drove straight into her face, stealing her breath, burning her exposed skin. Within minutes, she was shaking uncontrollably from cold. Her mind began to wander, memory mixing with present. She remembered her wedding day, Samuel nervous and earnest as he spoke his vows. She remembered her mother teaching her to sew, patient hands guiding her smaller ones. She remembered the first time she'd seen the mountains, how big and permanent they'd seemed, how she'd thought nothing could move them or change them. She'd been wrong. Mountains changed. Nothing was permanent except death, and that was coming for her now, in the form of white cold and failing light. Anna stumbled, went down on her knees in snow that was already 6 inches deep. Getting up took enormous effort. Her hands were beyond cold now, entering that strange warmth that meant frostbite. Her feet no longer hurt because she couldn't feel them at all. One step, she whispered to herself, her mother's words. Then another. She took that step. And another. And another. The world narrowed to the few feet of road visible ahead, to the mechanics of lifting each foot and placing it forward, to the simple act of continuing to breathe, even though the air felt like knives in her lungs. She had no sense of time passing, no awareness of distance covered. There was only snow and cold, and the dimming light as afternoon moved toward evening. She fell again, and this time getting up seemed impossible. The snow was soft here, almost welcoming. Part of her mind recognized that as a danger sign. She'd heard stories of people freezing, how the cold made you want to sleep, made you believe you were warm when you were dying. But she was so tired. Anna lay in the snow and thought about Samuel. At least she'd learned the truth. At least she knew he hadn't betrayed her, hadn't gambled away their future. He'd been trying to secure that future, and it had cost him his life. There was some comfort in that, cold comfort perhaps, but real nonetheless. The light was almost gone now. Anna couldn't feel most of her body. She tried to move her fingers and wasn't sure if they responded. The snow had covered her partially, a white blanket that would soon be a white grave. "I'm sorry," she whispered, though she wasn't sure who she was apologizing to. Samuel, perhaps. Her mother. Herself for not being stronger, smarter, more capable of survival. The snow fell. The wind howled. The light faded, and then through the storm a shape appeared. At first, Anna thought she was hallucinating, the cold playing tricks on her dying mind. But the shape solidified into a man on a horse wrapped in furs, moving slowly through the snow. He was speaking, though the wind tore his words away. Then he was beside her, dismounting, kneeling in the snow. His face was weathered, bearded, his eyes sharp and assessing even in the dim light. He touched her neck, checking for pulse, then her hands, and she saw his expression tighten. "Can you hear me?" His voice was deep, rough from disuse, but not unkind. Anna tried to speak, but couldn't make her jaw work properly. She managed a slight nod. "I'm going to pick you up. It's going to hurt when the blood starts moving again. But that means you're alive." He moved with practiced efficiency, wrapping her in what felt like a fur cloak, massive, heavy, warm, before lifting her into his arms. She weighed nothing to him, and he moved easily despite the burden, placing her across his horse before mounting behind her. 8 miles to my cabin. Stay awake if you can. Talk to me. What's your name?" Anna." The word came out slurred. "I'm Thomas. Thomas Hale. You're going to be all right, Anna. I've got you." The ride that followed existed in Anna's memory as fragments. The warmth of the fur against her skin, the solid presence of Thomas behind her, one arm holding her secure, the rhythmic movement of the horse. Pain beginning to return to her extremities, sharp and intense, exactly as Thomas had warned. She tried not to cry out, but small sounds escaped her. "That's good," Thomas said. "Pain means the damage isn't permanent yet. We're almost there." The cabin appeared through the snow, like something from a dream, a solid log structure tucked against a hillside, smoke rising from its chimney. Thomas dismounted, lifted Anna down, and carried her inside. The warmth hit her like a physical blow. A fire burned in a stone fireplace, and the cabin was blessedly warm after hours in the killing cold. Thomas laid her on a bed covered in furs, then immediately went to work removing her wet clothing. His movements were impersonal, clinical. He'd done this before. "Frostbite on your hands and feet," he said, more to himself than to her. "Not too severe yet, but another hour, and you'd have lost fingers and toes." "What in God's name were you doing out in a blizzard?" Anna's teeth chattered too hard to answer. Thomas wrapped her in blankets, layered them thick, then left her for a moment to prepare something at the stove. He returned with a cup of lukewarm broth. "Drink slowly." Your body needs to warm from the inside, too. She managed a few sips before exhaustion pulled her under. The last thing she saw before darkness took her was Thomas's face, weathered and serious, watching her with an expression that might have been concern or might have been regret that he'd gotten himself involved in someone else's trouble. When Anna woke, she didn't know how much. Later, the cabin was dim, lit only by firelight. Her body ached everywhere, a deep bone pain that suggested she'd come very close to not waking at all. But she was alive. Thomas sat by the fire working on something with his hands. A compass lay on the table beside him, brass and worn, catching the firelight. He seemed lost in thought, his profile sharp against the flames. "Thank you," Anna said, her voice raspy. He looked over, nodded once. "You're awake. That's good. How do you feel?" "Like I nearly froze to death." "Because you did." He rose, came to check her hands and feet, his touch gentle despite his rough appearance. "You'll keep all your fingers and toes, I think." "But it was close, Mrs. Briggs." "Enna Briggs." "Well, Mrs. Briggs, you're going to tell me why a woman was walking alone into a blizzard with no supplies and inadequate clothing. But first, you're going to eat and rest. The storm's not letting up. We're snowed in for at least a week, probably longer." He brought her more broth, and this time she managed half the cup before exhaustion claimed her again. As she drifted back into sleep, she heard Thomas moving around the cabin, banking the fire, preparing for the long storm. And she realized that Cooperman had been wrong about one thing. She hadn't died in the snow. Against all odds, someone had found her. Now she just had to figure out how to survive what came next. Anna woke to pale light, filtering through a small window, and the sound of wood being chopped outside. Her body still ached, but the bone-deep cold had been replaced by a different sensation, warmth, almost painful in its intensity. As if her body was relearning what it felt like to not be freezing. She sat up slowly, testing her limbs. Her fingers and toes throbbed, but responded to her commands. The cabin came into focus around her, small but well-built, everything in its place, with the efficiency of a man who lived alone and knew the value of organization. A table and 2 chairs, shelves holding supplies in neat rows, a stone fireplace with a good fire burning. Furs and blankets, tools hanging on the walls. The brass compass she'd noticed last night sat on a shelf near the window. Her own clothes hung near the fire, dry now, though they looked even more threadbare in daylight. Her mother's shawl lay carefully folded on the table, and Anna felt a rush of gratitude that Thomas had saved it, had taken the time to dry and fold it with care. The door opened, bringing a rush of cold air, and Thomas himself carrying an armload of split wood. He was a big man, she realized now in better light, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in wool and leather that had seen many seasons. His beard was more grey than dark, his face lined by weather and age. She guessed him to be in his middle 40s, perhaps a bit older. "You're up." He set the wood by the fireplace, brushed snow from his shoulders. "That's good. I was starting to worry you'd sleep another day. How long have I been here?" 3 days. You've been fevered most of that time. The cold got into you deep. I've been getting broth and water into you when you were conscious enough to swallow, but you probably don't remember. Anna didn't remember. 3 days. The storm still raged outside. She could hear the wind howling around the cabin's walls. 3 days of Thomas caring for her, a complete stranger. Why? The question came out before she could stop it. Thomas looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Why what? Why did you help me?" "You don't know me. I could be anyone. A thief, a criminal running from the law." He was quiet for a moment, then moved to the stove to pour coffee from a pot that looked like it had been there since dawn. He handed her a cup, tin warm in her hands, and sat down at the table with his own. "I was a scout in the war. Union Army. I learned field medicine because on long reconnaissance missions, you couldn't always get back to a proper surgeon. After the war, I've pulled 3 people out of snow over the years. 2 of them lived. The one who didn't, I found her too late. She had 2 children waiting for her at home, a husband who'd sent her to town for medicine they needed." He drank his coffee, stared into the cup. I swore after that I'd never leave someone to die in the mountains if I could help them. So that's why. Not because I know you, but because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't try." The answer was simple, honest, and it made Anna's throat tight. "The two who lived, do you know what happened to them? One was a prospector who thanked me and left as soon as the snow melted. Never saw him again. The other was a boy, maybe 10 years old, who'd gotten separated from his family's wagon train. I kept him here 2 weeks until his people came back looking for him. His father gave me a horse as thanks. Good horse, too. Rode him for 5 years. And now me, and now you." Thomas met her eyes. "You don't have to tell me why you were out in that storm, but we're going to be here together for at least another week, maybe 2, depending on how much snow falls. Might help to talk." Anna wrapped her hands around the coffee cup, felt the warmth seep into her palms. Part of her wanted to keep it all inside, to protect herself with silence. But Thomas had saved her life, had cared for her for 3 days while she was helpless. He deserved some honesty. "My husband died 6 months ago. The banker in Pine Hollow, Silas Cooperman, claimed Samuel owed him $3,000. He foreclosed on everything, forced me out of town. I had nowhere to go. The storm came up faster than I expected. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was enough truth to explain her presence on the mountain." Thomas nodded slowly. "Pine Hollow? I'd go there twice a year for supplies. Cooperman's a snake, everyone knows it, but he's got the money and the power so people look the other way. I'm sorry about your husband. Thank you. You have family elsewhere? Someone I can get word to when the snow clears?" No family, no friends who'd take me in." Anna heard the bleakness in her own voice. "I'm entirely alone, Mr. Hale." "Thomas, out here we don't stand on formality." He stood, moved to the stove, and began preparing something that smelled like salt pork and beans. "You're not alone right now, though. That's something." Over the next few days, a routine developed. Thomas would wake early, check the storm's progress, tend to his animals, a horse, a mule, and a few chickens he kept in a lean-to attached to the cabin. Anna, as her strength returned, began helping with small tasks, washing dishes in melted snow water, mending Thomas's clothes, which needed it badly, preparing simple meals from his stores of dried meat, beans, flour, and preserved vegetables. They didn't talk much at first. Thomas seemed unused to conversation, comfortable with long silences. But Anna found those silences restful rather than awkward. After months of townspeople's judgment and whispers, being with someone who expected nothing of her felt like a gift. On the 4th day, she was strong enough to stand at the window and look out at the snow. It had accumulated to the height of the cabin's windows, creating a white wall that blocked most of the light. The world had shrunk to this small space, this warm refuge against the killing cold outside. "Does it ever scare you?" Anna asked. Being this isolated, Thomas looked up from the leather strap he was mending. "Used to. First winter after I came up here, I thought I'd made a mistake. The silence gets inside your head, makes you hear things that aren't there. But then I realized the silence wasn't empty. It was full of weather and animal sounds and the mountain itself. You just have to learn to listen differently. How long have you been here?" 12 years. Built this cabin with my own hands the first summer. It's not much, but it's solid. Keeps the wind out, holds the heat in. That's all a man really needs. Why did you come here? To the mountain?" Thomas's hands stilled on the leather. For a moment Anna thought he wouldn't answer, that she'd pushed too far into his privacy. But then he set down the strap and looked at her directly. "I came home from the war to find my wife and daughter dead. Cholera outbreak while I was gone. They'd been in the ground 3 weeks before I got the letter. I couldn't—" He stopped, his jaw working. "I couldn't stay in that house, in that town. Everything reminded me of them, so I left. Came as far west as I could, then up into these mountains. Figured if I was going to hurt, I might as well do it somewhere nobody else had to watch." Anna felt tears prick her eyes. Not for herself, but for this man who'd lost everything and chosen exile rather than sympathy. "What were their names?" "Margaret, my wife, and Clara, our daughter. She was 8 years old." Thomas's voice was steady, but his hands had clenched into fists. "I hadn't said their names out loud in years. Not until just now. I'm sorry I made you— No. He cut her off, but gently. It's all right. Maybe it's time I did say their names. Seems wrong, somehow, that the only place they exist is in my memory, and I won't even speak of them. Anna crossed to the table, sat down across from him. Her own grief felt small suddenly, compared to losing a child, losing a whole family. At least she and Samuel had had time together, even if it had ended badly. At least she'd been there when he died. Samuel and I tried for children, she said quietly. I was pregnant 3 times. Lost each one before the 4th month. After the 3rd time, the doctor said my body probably couldn't carry to term. It broke something between us, I think. Samuel never blamed me out loud, but I always felt like I'd failed him somehow. That's a hard thing to carry, yes, but at least I knew him, loved him, had years together even if they weren't what we'd hoped. Your daughter never got to grow up. Your wife never got to see you come home. That's worse. Thomas was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was rough. There's no scale for grief, Anna. It all hurts. Trying to measure whose pain is greater doesn't help anyone. They sat in companionable silence after that, both lost in their own memories. Outside, the wind continued its assault on the cabin. But inside, the fire crackled warmly, and the lamp cast gentle light across the rough wood table. That night, Anna had the nightmare for the first time in weeks. She was back in Pine Hollow, watching Samuel fall from the roof in slow motion. But in the dream, she knew about the sword boards. Knew Cooperman had arranged it, and she was screaming for Samuel to stop, to get down. He couldn't hear her. He never heard her. And then he fell, and she woke gasping in the darkness. Thomas was there immediately, a lamp lit, his hand on her shoulder. You're safe. You're in the cabin. It's just a dream. Anna's heart hammered against her ribs. She could still see Samuel falling over and over. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to wake you. I'm a light sleeper. Always have been. He handed her a cup of water, waited while she drank. The war? My husband. He fell from a roof. I dream about it sometimes. Falling's a bad way to go. I'm sorry. Anna looked at him in the lamplight. This stranger who'd saved her life and was now sitting beside her bed in the middle of the night, offering quiet comfort without asking for explanations. On impulse, she reached into the bodice of her nightgown, one of Thomas's shirts, actually, since her own things were still too damaged to wear, and pulled out the sealed letter she'd kept hidden for 6 months. Samuel left this for me. I found it in his workshop after he died. I haven't opened it. I've been too afraid of what it might say. Thomas looked at the letter but didn't reach for it. Why are you showing me? Because I think I need to open it, and I don't want to do it alone. He nodded once. All right. I'll stay. Read it or don't read it. Your choice. But I'll be here either way. Anna broke the seal with shaking hands. The paper was cheap, the handwriting Samuel's familiar scrawl. She'd seen it on shopping lists, on notes left for her when he worked late. Now it was all she had left of him. The letter was short. Anna, if you're reading this, I'm likely dead and my plan has failed. I discovered silver on our property. Assay confirms it's worth a fortune. Cooperman knows. He's offered to buy me out for a fraction of its value, and when I refused, he began creating false debt records. I've kept evidence, hidden it where he won't find it. But I'm afraid he'll do more than ruin me financially. I'm afraid he'll kill me to get the land. I'm sorry for keeping this from you. I wanted to handle it myself, to protect you. That was foolish pride. If I'm dead, Cooperman will come after you next. Don't trust him. Don't believe anything he says about debt or contracts. The evidence is hidden in the false bottom of my toolbox, the one I kept in the workshop. Take it to the territorial marshal in Helena if you can. It proves everything. The real assay report, Cooperman's forged loan documents, all of it. I love you. I'm sorry I failed you in this. I hope you can forgive me. Samuel Anna read it twice, then a 3rd time, her hands trembling. Samuel had known. He'd known Cooperman was dangerous, had tried to protect her, had left evidence. And she'd spent 6 months believing he'd gambled their money away, believing the worst of him. He knew, she whispered. He tried to warn me. Thomas read the letter when she handed it to him, his expression darkening. Cooperman killed him. The fall wasn't an accident. No. Cooperman admitted it to me. Before they— Anna stopped, realized she'd said too much. Before they what, Anna? She told him then. All of it. Cooperman's confession, the Reynolds brothers walking her into the storm, the deliberate plan to let her die of exposure. The words tumbled out in a rush, and once started, she couldn't stop. When she finished, she was crying, months of grief and fear and anger finally breaking through. Thomas listened without interrupting. When she was done, he stood, paced to the window, looked out at the snow-covered darkness. "I should have left you in town," he said finally. "Should have known there was more to the story. You saved my life. Don't regret that. I'm not regretting saving you. I'm regretting that I can't ride down there right now and put a bullet in Cooperman." Thomas's voice was hard, colder than she'd heard it. "He murdered your husband, tried to murder you, and he'll get away with it if something isn't done. The evidence Samuel mentioned, I never found it. By the time I read the letter, Cooperman had already taken everything from the workshop, claimed it for debt. Then we'll find other evidence. Or we'll get testimony from people he's hurt." Or Thomas stopped, rubbed his face. "Or we'll figure something out. But you're not going back to Pine Hollow alone, and you're not letting that man get away with murder." Anna stared at him. "Why would you help me? This isn't your fight." "Maybe not. But I'm tired of being up here alone while people like Cooperman do whatever they want to, whoever they want. And maybe," he paused, seemed to be choosing his words carefully, "maybe you're not the only one who needs saving, Anna. Maybe I need this too. A reason to care about something other than just surviving another winter." The confession hung in the air between them. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the cabin something had shifted. They weren't strangers anymore. They were allies, bound by shared grief and the determination to see justice done. "When the snow clears," Anna said, "we'll go back together. We'll find the evidence or make new evidence. We'll expose him." "When the snow clears," Thomas agreed. And for the first time since Samuel died, Anna felt something other than despair. She felt anger, yes, but also purpose. Cooperman thought he'd won. He thought she'd died in the snow, convenient and quiet. He was wrong. She was alive, she knew the truth, and she had an ally. That would have to be enough. The storm broke on the 7th day. Anna woke to sunlight streaming through the window, real sunlight, bright and clear, the first she'd seen since arriving at the cabin. The silence was startling after days of wind's constant howl. When she looked out, the world had been transformed into a landscape of white, pristine and beautiful and utterly inhospitable. Thomas was already up, dressed for the cold, preparing to dig out the lean-to where the animals were kept. "Storm's over," he said, "but we're still snowed in. It'll take weeks for the pass to clear enough for travel." "Maybe longer," Anna nodded, part of her relieved. She wasn't ready to face Pine Hollow yet, wasn't ready to confront Cooperman or the people who'd stood by while he ruined her. Here in the cabin she could gather her strength, plan, prepare. Here she was safe. The days developed a rhythm. Thomas taught her mountain skills, how to read weather in the sky, how to move safely through deep snow, how to preserve food and ration supplies. Anna took over more of the domestic work, cooking meals that were simple but nourishing, mending not just Thomas's clothes but improving them, adding patches and reinforcements that would last. They talked more easily now, the initial awkwardness gone. Thomas told her stories about his war years, about scouting missions through enemy territory where silence meant survival, about friends lost and battles survived and the strange, guilty relief of coming home alive when so many didn't. Anna told him about her childhood in Ohio, about her mother's quiet strength and her father's early death, about meeting Samuel and believing she'd found stability, a future. About the slow erosion of that belief as Samuel became secretive and distant in his final year. "I was angry at him," Anna admitted one evening as they sat by the fire. "Even after he died, I was angry. I thought he'd been weak, foolish. Now I know he was trying to protect me, trying to handle everything himself. But I'm still angry. Angry that he didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth. Angry that he left me alone to deal with the consequences. Anger's natural. Doesn't mean you didn't love him. I did love him, but I'm not sure I knew him at the end. And now I never will. Thomas stared into the fire, his face thoughtful. Margaret and I had a fight before I left for the war. Something stupid, I can't even remember what now. I was angry when I left, and she was crying, and I didn't turn back to make it right. Figured I'd have years to apologize when I came home. But I didn't get years. I got nothing. And I've spent 12 years wondering if she died, thinking I was still angry with her. She knew you loved her. A fight doesn't erase that. Maybe, but I'll never know for sure. That's the thing about death, Anna. It leaves all these questions behind, all these conversations you'll never get to have. All you can do is make peace with the uncertainty. 2 weeks into their isolation, Anna was folding laundry when she found it, a small tin box tucked behind a loose board in the wall, near where she slept. It had clearly been there a long time, the tin spotted with rust, and she almost put it back without opening it. But curiosity won. Inside was a daguerreotype. A woman and a young girl, both dressed in their Sunday best, both smiling slightly in the way people did for photographs. The woman was pretty in a quiet way, dark-haired and serious-eyed. The girl had her mother's face, but her expression was brighter, less guarded. Margaret and Clara, it had to be. Anna studied the photograph for a long time. These two people who'd shaped Thomas's life so completely through their loss. She understood now why he'd come to the mountains, why he'd chosen isolation. With this much love lost, what was there to return to civilization for? She was still holding the photograph when Thomas came in from checking his snares. He froze when he saw it, his face going carefully blank. "I'm sorry," Anna said quickly. "I found a loose board, and the box was behind it. I shouldn't have opened it." Thomas stood motionless for a long moment, then slowly crossed to the table. He took the tin box from her hands, looked down at the photograph. "I haven't looked at this in 3 years, maybe 4. I told myself it was easier not to. Easier to forget their faces than to remember." His voice was quiet, almost wondering. "But I haven't forgotten. I see them every time I close my eyes. They were beautiful. They were everything." Thomas sat down heavily, still holding the photograph. Clara wanted to be a teacher. She loved books, learning, could read before she was 5. Margaret used to say she'd gotten all her smarts from her mother, none from me. She was probably right. Tell me about them. Not about their deaths, about their lives. What was Clara like? Thomas looked up at her, something raw and painful in his expression. "Why? Because they deserve to be remembered, and because you deserve to speak about them without it being a tragedy. They were people, Thomas. They had lives and personalities and quirks. Tell me about those things." For a moment, Anna thought he'd refuse, would put the photograph away and return to his usual silence. But instead, he leaned back in his chair and began to talk. Clara couldn't whistle. "She tried for months. I spent a whole summer trying to teach her. She'd purse her lips and blow, but nothing but air came out. She got so frustrated she cried once, and Margaret laughed and said maybe whistling wasn't a necessary life skill. But Clara was stubborn. Even after I left for the war, she was still trying. Margaret wrote me about it in her letters." Anna smiled. "And your wife? What was Margaret like?" "Practical. She could stretch $1 further than anyone I ever knew. During lean times, she'd make 1 chicken last a week, and we'd eat better than when we had money. She kept a garden that was the envy of the neighborhood, and she sang, not well, mind you, but constantly, while she cooked, while she cleaned. Drove me crazy sometimes, but I'd give anything to hear it again. The words came slowly at first, then faster, 12 years of silence breaking like a dam. Thomas talked about his family, about ordinary days and small moments that had meant everything. And Anna listened, holding space for his grief and his love and the terrible weight of survivorship. When he finally stopped, the lamp had burned low and the cabin had grown cold. Thomas sat with the photograph in his hands, tears on his face, but his expression was peaceful in a way Anna hadn't seen before. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for asking, for listening. I didn't know how much I needed to talk about them. You can talk about them any time. I'd like to hear more, if you want to share." Thomas nodded, carefully put the photograph back in its tin box. But this time, he set the box on the shelf near his bed, in plain sight. Not hidden anymore, not forgotten. That night, Anna woke to find Thomas standing at the window, looking out at the moonlit snow. She started to turn over, give him privacy, but he spoke without turning. I was thinking about leaving. Going back to the war, in a way. There's a place in Montana, a fort that needs scouts and guides. Steady work, decent pay. I was planning to go there when spring came, leave this cabin behind. And now I don't know. You've reminded me what it feels like to have a purpose beyond just surviving. To care about something, about someone. He turned to face her. I'm not saying this to make you uncomfortable. I know you're grieving Samuel. I know you're dealing with Cooperman and everything that happened. But I want you to know that helping you, being here with you, it's meant something to me. More than I expected. Anna sat up, pulled the blanket around her shoulders. It's meant something to me too. You saved my life, Thomas. More than just from the snow. You saved me from believing I was alone in the world, that no one cared what happened to me. You're not alone. Not anymore. The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken implications. Anna felt something shift in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. It was too soon, she told herself. Samuel had been gone less than a year. She had no business feeling anything for another man, especially in these circumstances. But she felt it anyway. And from the way Thomas looked at her, careful and hopeful and afraid all at once, she knew he felt it too. When we go back to Pine Hollow, Anna said carefully, when we face Cooperman, I need to do that first, before anything else. I need to clear Samuel's name, get justice for him. I owe him that. I know, and I'll help you do it. No expectations, Anna, no demands. Just let me help. Let me stand with you. I'd like that. They didn't talk more that night, but something had been said without words. A possibility had been acknowledged carefully, like a candle flame sheltered from wind. It might grow or it might gutter out, but it was there, small and warm and alive. Over the following days, as February gave way to early March, Anna noticed changes in herself. She was stronger physically, the mountain work and Thomas's teaching having built muscle and endurance she hadn't possessed before. But more than that, she felt stronger inside. The woman who'd walked into the blizzard had been broken, defeated, ready to die. The woman who would walk out when spring came was different. She had purpose. She had an ally. And she had anger, clean and righteous, directed at a man who'd thought himself untouchable. Cooperman had made a mistake when he sent her into that storm. He'd assumed the mountain would kill her, that nature would do what he was too cautious to do directly. But the mountain hadn't killed her. Instead, it had given her time to heal, to plan, to prepare. When she returned to Pine Hollow, she wouldn't be the penniless widow people had pitied or scorned. She'd be something else entirely, something dangerous, and Silas Cooperman was going to learn that some women didn't die quiet. Some women came back. March brought the first signs that winter's grip was loosening. The sun rose earlier each morning and set later each evening. During midday, the temperature climbed above freezing, and Anna could hear water dripping from the cabin's eaves, snow melting and refreezing. The mountain's slow thaw beginning. Thomas began taking longer trips to check his trap lines, sometimes gone for half a day or more. He always left Anna well supplied with firewood and food, and he'd taught her how to use his rifle if needed, though he said she'd likely never need it. Bears are still sleeping. Wolves won't come near the cabin if you keep the fire going. The only real danger up here is the cold, and you know how to manage that now. Anna did know. She could read the weather, bank a fire to last hours, layer clothing for maximum warmth. She'd become comfortable in this isolated place, learning to appreciate the silence Thomas had spoken of, the way it wasn't empty but full of subtle sounds, wind through pines, distant bird calls, the creek running beneath its ice. One afternoon, while Thomas was out checking traps, Anna decided to organize his shelves properly. He'd been living alone so long that his system, if it could be called that, consisted mainly of putting things wherever they'd fit. She found supplies mixed together haphazardly, food items next to tools, medical supplies scattered across 3 different shelves. She was consolidating the medical supplies when she found a set of wood-carving tools wrapped in oiled cloth. The tools were well made and clearly expensive, the kind a craftsman would treasure. They'd been carefully maintained, despite apparent disuse. The blades sharp and free of rust. When Thomas returned that evening with 2 rabbits and a grouse, Anna had the tools laid out on the table. I found these while organizing.
They're beautiful.
Do you carve? Thomas glanced at the tools, and something crossed his face. Not quite pain, but close. Used to. Haven't touched them in years. Why not? Clara loved to watch me carve. I'd make her little animals mostly. Dogs, horses, birds. She'd line them up on her windowsill like a little zoo. He picked up one of the knives, turned it in his hands. After she died, I couldn't bear to touch them. Reminded me too much of her. Anna understood that kind of pain, the way ordinary objects could become unbearable weights. Maybe it's time to try again. Not to forget her, but to remember her differently. To honor what she loved. Thomas was quiet for a long time, still holding the knife. Finally, he nodded. Maybe you're right. Would you like to learn? Carving, I mean. It's good for winter evenings, gives your hands something to do. I'd like that. So Thomas taught her. They started with simple projects. A spoon from a piece of pine, a bowl from a section of birch. Anna's first attempts were clumsy, the wood splintering under her inexperienced hands. But Thomas was patient. He showed her how to work with the grain, how to let the wood guide the blade, how to see the shape inside the rough piece and carefully reveal it. Margaret used to say, carving was about patience, Thomas said one evening as they worked by lamplight. About taking away everything that doesn't belong until only the truth remains. That's beautiful. And wise. She was both those things. He smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. I'm glad I can talk about her now. About both of them. It hurt less than I thought it would. Or maybe it hurts differently. Not like a wound, but like remembering something precious that you'd misplaced and found again. Yes, exactly that. As Anna's carving skills improved, she began to experiment with more complex shapes. She carved a small bird, then a horse, then a human figure. The human figure was meant to be Thomas, though she didn't tell him that. She wanted to capture his strength, the way he carried himself with quiet confidence, the kindness in his weathered face. One evening in late March, Thomas produced a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket. Went to the pass today. Snow's melting fast, faster than usual for this time of year. The road will be passable in 2 weeks, maybe 3. We should start preparing for the trip down. Anna felt her stomach tighten. For weeks, she'd been safe here, removed from Cooperman and Pine Hollow and the complications waiting below. Now reality was reasserting itself. I'm not sure I'm ready. You're ready. You're stronger than you think, Anna. Stronger than you were when you arrived, certainly. Thomas leaned forward, his expression serious. But we need to plan this carefully. Cooperman thinks you're dead, which gives us an advantage. If we're smart about how we approach this, we can use that. They spent the next several evenings planning. Thomas had contacts in the territory, men he'd guided through the mountains, traders he'd dealt with over the years. Some of them owed him favors, one in particular, a man named Jacob Winters, who ran a trading post between Pine Hollow and Helena, had been wronged by Cooperman in a land deal and might be willing to help. Winters isn't brave enough to stand against Cooperman alone, Thomas explained. But if we can show him that Cooperman's vulnerable, that there's evidence of wrongdoing, he might be willing to testify. And if we get Winters, others will follow. Nobody likes Cooperman, they're just afraid of him. What about the evidence Samuel mentioned in his letter? The toolbox with the false bottom? We'll have to assume Cooperman destroyed it or has it hidden somewhere we can't reach. But if we can find other victims, other people Cooperman has swindled, we can build a case without Samuel's evidence. It'll be harder, but not impossible. Anna felt a flicker of hope. She'd been so focused on Samuel's specific situation that she hadn't considered the bigger picture. Cooperman had been operating in Pine Hollow for 5 years. How many others had he cheated? How many people might be willing to speak out if they knew they weren't alone? There's Martha, Anna said slowly. She told me Cooperman had threatened her husband's business. She might know of others? Good, we'll start with her. Quietly, carefully. The key is building a coalition before Cooperman realizes what's happening. If he knows you're alive and gathering evidence, he'll move against us. We need to be ready to present everything to the territorial marshal all at once. Give Cooperman no time to destroy records or intimidate witnesses. They talked late into the night, refining their plan. Thomas would approach his contacts first, feeling out who might be willing to help. Anna would write down everything she knew, every conversation with Cooperman, every detail of what the Reynolds brothers had done. They'd need documentation, testimony, leverage. It felt good to plan, to take action instead of just surviving. Anna realized that Thomas had been right. She was ready for this, not just physically but emotionally. The woman who'd walked into the blizzard would have been too broken to fight, but the woman who would walk out was different. The mountain had tested her and she'd endured. One evening, as Anna practiced her carving, she asked Thomas about something that had been puzzling her. "When you found me in the snow, why were you out in that storm? You'd mentioned a supply run, but most people would have turned back when it got bad." Thomas's knife paused on the wood. "I'd gone to the trading post, Winter's place. Got what I needed and started back. The storm came up faster than I expected. I should have waited it out at Winter's, but I was anxious to get home. Don't know why. Just had a feeling I needed to be back at the cabin." A feeling? I don't claim to understand it. Maybe I heard something on the wind, or saw something without realizing I'd seen it. Maybe it was just luck. But when I found you, he looked at her directly. I almost didn't stop. I was cold, tired, wanted to get home. But something made me look twice at that shape in the snow. And I'm glad I did. So am I. I think Thomas hesitated, choosing his words carefully. I think maybe we were both meant to survive that storm. You, obviously, but me too. I'd been dying up here, Anna, just slowly, going through the motions of living without any real purpose. You gave me a reason to care again, to want something more than just another season, another year. Anna set down her carving. What do you want, Thomas? After we deal with Cooperman, after all this is over, what do you want? He was quiet for a long time. I want to not be alone anymore. I want to wake up in the morning and have someone to talk to. I want to build something, not just maintain it. I want— He stopped, then finished in a rush. I want what I had with Margaret and Clara, not to replace them, but to have that kind of connection again. That sense of home, with me, if you're willing. I know it's too soon. I know you're still grieving Samuel. But yes, with you if you'll have me. Not now, not until you're ready. But someday. Anna's heart beat fast. Part of her felt guilty for even considering this, for feeling anything for another man so soon after Samuel's death. But Samuel was gone, and she was alive, and Thomas was offering her something she'd thought she'd lost forever. A future, a partnership, a home. I don't know if I'm ready, she said honestly. But I know I want to find out. After we finish in Pine Hollow. After I've cleared Samuel's name and seen Cooperman answer for what he did. Maybe then we can talk about what comes next. That's enough for me. More than enough. The next day, Thomas rode down to check the pass and came back with news. Road's clear enough for travel. We can leave day after tomorrow if you're ready. Anna looked around the cabin that had been her refuge, her sanctuary, for nearly 2 months. She'd arrived here barely alive, broken and defeated. She was leaving stronger, prepared, with an ally and a plan. I'm ready. They spent the next day preparing. Thomas checked and cleaned his weapons, a rifle and a pistol, both well maintained. Anna packed the few belongings she had, including her mother's shawl, now mended and clean. Thomas gave her one of his extra coats, heavy wool that would keep her warm on the ride down. That final evening, Anna finished the carving she'd been working on, a pine box. Small but intricately decorated with carved scenes of the mountain, the cabin, trees bent under snow. Inside, she placed her mother's shawl, Samuel's letter, and the photograph of Thomas's family that he'd given her permission to keep for our memories, she explained when she showed it to Thomas. The things that shaped us, the people we loved and lost. We carry them with us, but we don't have to carry them as burdens. They can be treasures instead. Thomas examined the box, running his fingers over the carved details. This is beautiful work. You've learned well. I had a good teacher that night. Anna lay awake, listening to the familiar sounds of the cabin, the fire's crackle. Thomas's steady breathing from his bed across the room, wind in the pines outside. Tomorrow, they'd begin the journey back to civilization, back to conflict and confrontation and uncertainty. But tonight, she was safe. Tonight, she was home, in the unexpected sanctuary the mountain had provided. In the darkness, Thomas's voice came quiet. "Anna, I want you to know, whatever happens in Pine Hollow, whatever we face, you're not alone in it. I'll stand with you, I know." "Thank you, Thomas. It's not just debt I'm paying or obligation I'm meeting. It's more than that." Anna understood what he wasn't quite saying. "I know. For me too." Silence settled again, but it was a comfortable silence, full of understanding and the beginning of something neither of them was quite ready to name, but both felt growing between them like the first. Green shoots of spring pushing through melting snow. Tomorrow they'd face the world. But tonight they could rest. The ride down from the cabin took most of the day. The mountain trail was treacherous with snowmelt, sections washed out or thick with mud that sucked at the horses' hooves. Thomas led the way on his sorrel gelding, Anna following on the mule, steadier and more sure-footed than a horse in these conditions. They didn't head straight for Pine Hollow. Instead, Thomas guided them northwest toward Winter's trading post, a day's ride from the town. Better to approach this carefully, to gather allies before facing Cooperman directly. Anna found herself studying Thomas as they rode, seeing him differently now in the broader world. In the cabin, he'd been her whole universe, their relationship existing in isolation. But out here, watching him navigate the trail with practiced ease, she saw him as others might see him, a capable mountain man, weathered and strong, a guide worth following. Around midday, they stopped to water the horses at a creek running fast with snowmelt. Thomas produced jerky and hardtack from his saddlebags, and they ate standing, neither wanting to sit in the wet ground. "How far to Winter's place?" Anna asked. "Another 4 hours if the trail stays passable." "We'll get there before dark." Thomas scanned the sky, reading weather signs. "Clear through tomorrow, I'd say. Good traveling weather. What if Winters won't help us? Then we find someone else." But Winters is practical. Show him that Cooperman is vulnerable, that there's profit or safety in opposing him, and he'll come around. He's not brave, but he's not foolish either. They remounted and continued. As they descended, the landscape changed. Snow gave way to mud and dead grass. Bare aspens showed the first hint of bud on their branches. Spring came earlier at lower elevations, and Anna felt almost dizzy at the sudden abundance of space and light after months in the cabin's close confines. By late afternoon, they emerged from the forest onto a rough road that led to Winter's trading post. The building was larger than Anna expected, a 2-story log structure with a wide porch and several outbuildings. Smoke rose from 2 chimneys, and she could see a corral with several horses and a vegetable garden just beginning to green. A man emerged from the main building as they rode up. Mid-50s, stocky, with suspicious eyes and a shotgun held casual but ready. He studied them for a long moment before recognition crossed his face. "Thomas Hale, thought maybe you died up in those mountains." "Not yet, Jacob." Thomas dismounted, then helped Anna down. "This is Mrs. Anna Briggs. We need to talk, and it's best done inside." Winters looked at Anna with open curiosity, but he nodded and gestured them in. The trading post's interior was dim and crowded with supplies, barrels of flour and sugar, shelves of canned goods, tools and traps and ammunition. A massive stone fireplace dominated one wall, and several chairs clustered near it. Winter's wife appeared from a back room, a thin woman with watchful eyes and work-hardened hands. "You'll be wanting supper, I expect." "Got stew and fresh bread." "That would be welcome, thank you," Anna said. Over the meal, Thomas laid out the situation. He didn't hold back. He told Winters everything, from Samuel's discovery of silver to Cooperman's murder of him to the attempt on Anna's life. Winters listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker as the story progressed. When Thomas finished, Winters sat back and let out a long breath. "That's quite a tale. You have proof of any of this?" Anna pulled Samuel's letter from her coat and handed it over. Winters read it slowly, his wife reading over his shoulder. "This is Samuel Briggs' hand?" Winters asked. "It is. I'd know his writing anywhere. And you're certain Cooperman confessed to killing him?" "He told me himself." Explained the whole thing, the forged debts, the sabotaged roof, his plan to claim the land after I died in the storm. "He didn't think I'd live to repeat it." Winters exchanged a look with his wife. "Cooperman tried something similar with me 3 years back. I owned some land south of Pine Hollow, inheritance from my father. Good timber on it. Cooperman approached me with an offer to buy, and when I refused, he suddenly produced documents claiming my father had taken a loan from his bank years prior, using the land as collateral. The papers looked official, had what appeared to be my father's signature. Were they real?" Thomas asked. "I don't know. My father's been dead 10 years. I can't ask him. But I knew he'd never liked bankers, never trusted them enough to borrow. He paid cash for everything. Still, I couldn't prove the documents were forged, and Cooperman had the law on his side. I lost the land. How many others?" Anna leaned forward. "How many people has Cooperman done this to?" "Hard to say. People don't talk about it. Shame, I suppose, or fear. But I know of at least 3 other cases like mine. The McAllister family lost their farm. Old Henderson, who ran the general store before it went to his son, lost property near the creek. And there was a prospector named Davies who claimed Cooperman stole his claim through legal trickery. Davies got drunk one night and shot at Cooperman's house. Missed, but the marshal ran him out of the territory. Would any of them testify?" Thomas asked. Winters was quiet for a moment. "Maybe, if they thought it would make a difference. But Cooperman owns the marshal, owns half the businesses in Pine Hollow. Going against him is dangerous. Which is why we need numbers," Anna said. "Not one person's word against his, but 5, 10, however many victims we can find. All together, all at once. We take it to the territorial marshal in Helena over Cooperman's head. That might work." Winters rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. "The territorial marshal, man named Bishop, has a reputation for honesty. Won't be bought, won't be bullied. If you can get him solid evidence, he'll act on it. Then that's what we do," Thomas said. "We find the victims, document the cases, present everything to Bishop. Can you help us?" Winters looked at his wife again, some silent communication passing between them. Finally he nodded. "I'll help. And I know where to find the McAllisters. They're farming up near Helena now. Might be willing to talk. Henderson's son might have records from his father's case. And I heard Davies ended up in Butte. Could send word to him." "What about people still in Pine Hollow?" Anna asked. "Were people who've been hurt but are too afraid to leave or speak up?" "Martha Whitfield, the seamstress," Winter's wife said quietly. "Cooperman holds a loan over her husband's business. She might talk if she thought there was real chance of stopping him. And there's the Reynolds brothers. The Reynolds brothers work for Cooperman," Anna interrupted. "They're the ones who walked me into the storm." "I know. But Carl Reynolds has a conscience, or at least the shadow of one. His brother Ned is pure mean, but Carl, he might be persuaded to testify if he thought he wouldn't hang for it." The conversation continued into the evening. Winters drew up a list of possible witnesses and began calculating how to approach each one. Some would need to be contacted discreetly, others might respond to a direct appeal. It would take weeks to gather everyone, to document their cases, to prepare a presentation strong enough to convince the territorial marshal to act. "Where will you stay while we work on this?" Winters asked. "Can't go back to the cabin, too isolated. And Pine Hollow's too dangerous if Cooperman learns you're alive. There's an old trapper's cabin, about 10 miles west of here," Thomas said. "Haven't been used in years, but it's still standing. We could base ourselves there, stay out of sight while we coordinate everything. I'll supply you," Winters offered. "Food, ammunition, whatever you need. Consider it my contribution to bringing that snake down." They left the trading post before dawn the next morning, supplied and provisioned, with Winters' promise to begin contacting potential witnesses. The trapper's cabin Thomas had mentioned was rougher than his own place. 1 room, dirt floor, roof that leaked in several places. But it was shelter, and it was hidden, accessible only by a trail that few people knew existed. Over the following weeks, a network began to form. Winters sent word to the McAllisters and Davies. Thomas rode out to contact people he knew who'd had dealings with Cooperman. Anna wrote everything down, creating a detailed record of each case, each piece of evidence, each witness statement. Martha Whitfield was the hardest to approach. Anna couldn't risk going into Pine Hollow herself, so Thomas went, claiming to need dress goods for his sister staying with him. Martha was suspicious at first, afraid of a trap. But when Thomas mentioned Anna's name and showed her Samuel's letter, she broke down weeping. "I was so sorry," Martha told Thomas in the back room of her shop, her voice barely above a whisper. "I tried to help, but William was so afraid of losing the shop. Cooperman threatened to call in our loan if I gave Anna any work or shelter. I've felt guilty every day since, knowing she probably died in that storm. She didn't die. She's alive and she's fighting back. Will you help her?" Martha wiped her eyes, straightened her shoulders. "Yes. Tell me what you need." Thomas returned to the trapper's cabin with Martha's testimony. Cooperman had forged her husband's signature on loan documents, doubling their debt without their knowledge. She had the original documents and the forgeries, had kept them in case she ever found the courage to challenge him. "That's good," Anna said, reading through Martha's statement. "That's evidence of forgery. If we can show a pattern of it, Bishop will have to act." More witnesses came forward, slowly but surely. The McAllisters provided testimony about their farm. Davies, contacted in Butte, sent a detailed account of how Cooperman had stolen his mining claim through manipulation of territorial land office records. Each case added weight, built the picture of systematic fraud and intimidation. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Carl Reynolds appeared at the trapper's cabin late one evening, alone, his hat in his hands. "Mrs. Briggs," he said when Anna answered his knock. "I need to talk to you." Thomas was there immediately, rifle ready, but Anna waved him back. "Let him speak. I've been thinking about what we did, walking you out into that storm. I told myself it wasn't murder, that you might survive, that we were just following orders. But I knew you'd die, and I did it anyway because Cooperman paid well and because I was a coward." Carl looked at his boots. "I can't undo it, but I can testify. I can tell the marshal what Cooperman ordered, what we did. Won't bring your husband back, but maybe it'll help." "Why now?" Thomas asked, still suspicious. "Why come forward?" "Because my wife's pregnant. First child. And I was thinking about what kind of man I want to be when that baby looks at me. Not the kind who murders women for money. Not the kind who serves a snake like Cooperman." Carl met Anna's eyes. "I'm not asking for forgiveness, just offering testimony if you'll have it." Anna studied him for a long moment. Carl Reynolds had helped try to kill her, but he was also the key to proving Cooperman's direct involvement in attempted murder. "I'll have your testimony. But you understand that when this goes to court, you'll likely face charges yourself." "I understand. I'm willing to take responsibility for what I did." Carl's testimony was damning. He detailed Cooperman's orders, described the conversation where Cooperman had admitted to murdering Samuel, provided dates and specifics that corroborated Anna's account. With Carl's statement, they had direct evidence of conspiracy to commit murder. By mid-April, the case was built. 23 witnesses, 14 documented cases of fraud or intimidation, physical evidence of forgery, testimony of murder, and attempted murder. Anna and Thomas spread it all out in the trapper's cabin, papers covering every surface, a web of crimes spanning 5 years. "This is enough," Thomas said. "Bishop will have to act on this. We need to take it to Helena." But Anna was staring at one particular document, the property deed to the land she and Samuel had owned. The land with the silver. According to the records Winters had obtained, Cooperman hadn't filed a claim on it yet. Legally, it still belonged to her. "He's waiting," Anna said slowly. "Cooperman's waiting to make sure I'm really dead before he files the claim. He doesn't want any legal complications. So that land is still mine. Which means the silver is mine. Which means," Anna looked up at Thomas, realization dawning, "which means we have leverage. Real leverage. Not just testimony, but financial pressure. If I reclaim that property publicly, Cooperman loses everything he's worked for. And if he tries to stop me, he proves his guilt. Thomas smiled slowly. You're thinking like a tactician now. I'm thinking like someone who's learned from a good teacher. Anna began gathering the documents. We go to Helena. We present this to Bishop. We get legal backing to reclaim my property. And then we go back to Pine Hollow and watch Silas Cooperman's world fall apart. For the first time since Samuel's death, Anna felt something that might have been joy. Not happiness. The grief was still too fresh for that. But satisfaction, anticipation, the prospect of justice after months of powerlessness. Cooperman thought he'd won. He thought he'd gotten away with murder, theft, intimidation, fraud. He thought himself untouchable. He was about to learn otherwise.